Jack Dorsey, CEO of Twitter, says hyperinflation is here. Is that the direct result of all-time highs of Bitcoin? Find out now at our latest Diamond Hands podcast. All right, welcome to Diamond Hands Podcast, a TDR podcast for the week of October 18th, the division of the Dales Media Group. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Before we begin, all views in the Diamond Hands Podcast and the guests on this podcast are purely opinion. You should not treat any opinions expressed by us or our guests as investment advice. The views on this podcast are solely intended to be informational and are not investment advice. Joining me, as usual, millennial entrepreneur Anthony Varrell. Anthony Varrell. Anyway, apologies for that. Anthony, how's things?
It's good. It's good. It was good to be in Vegas last week. It's good to be back on the podcast, and good to be back in the office.
Vegas, baby. Yes. Ben, How are things, brother?
Things are good. Vegas was awesome. Our sectors could be going a little bit better, but that's okay. Things are going to turn around.
Yeah, interesting week to say the least, and we'll get into that in a moment because all three of us were there last week, had some interesting conversations about the entire space. But before I begin, and I think this is a hot topic right now with everything that's going on in the world, is inflation. And I want to begin with that in a tweet that went viral last week with CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, mentioning that hyperinflation, needless to say, is going to change everything. But further to that, it's happening and happening now. So saying that, do you agree with that? And if so, what assets do you buy knowing the times that we're living in right now, Anthony?
I agree with him to an extent. I think inflation's here. It's evident. I've seen everything that I buy on a weekly basis go up. I've seen gas go up. I've seen houses are egregious in South Florida right now. And for instance, my wife's company, she can't get clients supplies, medical supplies until 6 months out. Wow. Supply chains are stretched. Prices are going up, and inflation's here. I don't know if I'd be as worried about hyperinflation as it would be stagflation. Stagflation would be a worst case scenario for the United States and abroad, especially where we are right now with the monetary policy. But I'd be looking to Bitcoin. Paul Tudor Jones was on CNBC last week, said that Bitcoin has been validated as a store of value. Bitcoin has been validated as a hedge against inflation. And he ultimately said that he does believe that Bitcoin has replaced gold. Now, I still would love to own and do own gold, going with Bitcoin against hedging for inflation.
Ben, what do you think? As far as assets are concerned, what do you like?
Well, I think I like Bitcoin, of course, maybe Ethereum. Gold, I think maybe gets overlooked a little bit because it's kind of thought of as a relic, especially with the millennial and Gen Z crowd. But, it's got 5,000 years of history behind it as an inflation hedge. So, yeah. Things can come back in vogue. It's a little frustrating if you're trading gold because, it trades in sort of a consolidatory pattern for long periods of time, and it's sort of like dead money compared to other assets. But if it really is sort of a stagflation or, hyperinflation kind of thing, which I echo Anthony's sentiments, I don't think it's hyperinflation, then I think gold is you want to perhaps put 10% of your net worth in there, and even silver too, maybe even more in silver, just because silver has the precious metal component, but it's also in high demand with all the electric vehicles and things like that. So I'm hearing that silver stocks are sort of not very high in a lot of places. So who knows?
Where if we continue to go down this road of inflation, what does this look like for our economy in say the next 6 months to a year? If we continue to see supply shortage, real estate values through the roof, or home ownership is becoming more and more of a distant dream for younger generations. But just the supply chain of everything is just low shortage everywhere across the world. If we continue this route, what path are we heading down?
A dire one. It's a path that I would prefer not to see. You're going to get the wealth gap increase even more, and you're going to have probably the middle and lower class wiped out. People that are levered to equities, people that are levered to gold, to Bitcoin, to real estate, they can hide their capital in tangible assets, and I mean they can combat inflation. But I mean, people spending power from a fiat perspective on the lower end of the totem pole, they're losing their spending power every day as inflation kicks up, especially because they're not earning as much as they're consuming. So I mean, it's somewhere I don't want to go. It's somewhere that we've avoided thus far, coming out of the pandemic. But I could hope that somebody like a Kathy Wood is right, that I mean we're going to see inflation subside going into year's end versus accelerate, as someone like Jack Dorsey would say.
You know, this looks a little bit like, in a way, like the 1970s in a way. I mean, obviously there are major differences. You know, the 70s was more of like an oil supply shortage in the Middle East, and there was a whole bunch of issues there. But today it's like sort of a cost push inflation where you have like, 100 tankers or cargo ships off the coast of Long Beach just not allowed in. So, because of COVID issues, because people leaving the ports because they don't want to get vaccinated, things like that, right? So, it's hard to say. And the money supply, of course, is going through the roof. It's almost straight vertical over the last, 18, 20 months. So it's a really tricky situation whether, inflation is really going to stay hold or not, because you have demographics sort of in decline. Obviously there's a cost push inflation involved here. I think, macro, people are having less, right? I think that's sort of the plan from the Global Economic Forum and all that. But on the other hand, we have cost push inflation. We have, a ramping money supply. So, it's a really, really tricky environment right now. That's why you probably want to hedge a little bit and maybe have assets in Bitcoin and gold, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's a scary place we're going.
Let's shift then to crypto. Based off of this topic of inflation, is that the direct result why we saw all-time highs, let's say last week, Bitcoin achieving over $67,000?
I mean, I could attribute some of it to that. I think a lot of millennials and Gen Zers are paring down their consumption, and due to inflationary fears, they're putting their money into crypto and into equities, which is why we're seeing the market just rip higher in tandem with crypto. Bitcoin took out that all-time high, hit 67,000, then it's gone back down to 60 a couple times, but I mean the bull market I think is still intact.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we still take out those all-time highs by the end of the year.
Yeah, I 100%. I think inflation had a little bit to do with it, and I say that only because, as sort of an amateur chartist, I noticed that the volume was sort of, it went through briefly the all-time highs on about a third of the volume on the futures market. So, it wasn't like, just a wave of buying because some event happened and it, shot up to new levels on like higher volume. It was sort of like, a persistent bid underneath, driving it upwards. And I think, perhaps inflation at least had something to do with it, where people just want to protect their assets. I mean, you have like food prices up 20% year over year. You have all these things happening, and I think, again, it's a lot of it's cost push inflation where the supply of goods is not there. So it's like, causing prices to rise of available stock, really. I think that's a large part of it. And people just want to protect their money and their assets.
So with millennials and Gen Ys accumulating over 30% of the world's population, they don't trust the banking systems. They don't trust the government. They have a new way of doing things. That's pretty evident on how this world is operating since the pandemic. We've talked about Bitcoin reaching all-time highs and just bulldozing through 67,000. Tough question to answer, but how high can we go?
I don't think 100K Bitcoin is out of the question in the short term. I mean, God knows where it could go in the long term with supply and demand. I mean, with something like,
wow.
Yeah, I think Bitcoin hits 100K in the next 6 months. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes there. I'll be a very happy recipient of that of that movement, but I also wouldn't be surprised. But I mean, it's an ambiguous question. I mean, no one really knows.
Yeah.
I mean, luckily we're dealing with great forces with supply and demand, and I mean, user adoption in crypto is just going up and up and up. I mean, you look at it through Bitcoin, through Ethereum, NFTs. I mean, the use cases for crypto and the real world applications for crypto just keep growing. And as they keep growing, those prices of those coins and those market caps are going to keep going up.
And
until they reach some sort of equilibrium.
Milestone for adoption as well. I think it was Mastercard gave the go-ahead for companies that wanted to offer Bitcoin as a payment. They're going to allow that, right? So that's a huge. I mean, this is like a world-leading credit card company, right?
Well, as a
Multinational.
reward,
So,
as a reward too. So like you would get cash back or like you would get airline miles. Mastercard is now going to allow their affiliates and Mastercard to reward consumers in crypto.
that's huge. I mean, that's
Yeah,
huge.
it's all going to be
No
done
one,
through. Yeah, it's
yeah,
massive.
massive.
I mean, when you look at at fintech and with the credit card companies and with banking institutions, like I'm a huge proponent of organic growth through the blockchain sector, and having these organizations such as Bitcoin, such as Ethereum, really pave the way. But I mean, realistically, if you want to look at it not in a vacuum, the rails and the on-ramps to mass adoption of crypto is going to be the Mastercards of the world. It's going to be the Squares of the world. It's going to be Bank of America. I mean, when you start to see these platforms start to use it in a use case scenario, I mean, that's when you're really going to start to hit critical mass of these cryptos being adopted and blockchain being widespread throughout the only not only the financial system but through everything.
It's definitely past a corner where you wondered if this industry would succeed 3, 4, 5 years ago. But clearly now, with the momentum that's building, and as younger people become older, this becomes the norm. And it's not a matter of if, but when for this industry. Do you not think?
Yeah, it's like cannabis. It's like cannabis. The genie's out of the bottle. Genie's out of the bottle in both arenas. We've come so far that the only thing that could possibly derail crypto is if Satoshi Nakamoto comes out of God knows where and Bitcoin just implodes.
Yeah.
That or the CIA is behind Bitcoin. If that happens, then crypto, to be blunt, is fucked. But anything aside from that, I don't see it. I don't see the genie going back in the bottle. I don't see users adopting it less. If anything, it's just more and more, especially as we go down this crazy monetary policy train, things like inflation and things like the distrust for the government just keeps on compounding and compounding and compounding. I mean, you're going to see more decentralized and P2P needs moving into the future.
You just nailed the question on the head, or the comment on the head about the distrust, right? Like, imagine the younger generation, Gen Zs, early millennials, the ones that are going to come up and eventually lead the nation and be in positions of power, just getting completely fucked with, like, you know, what happened in 2008 and just the inflationary ramp and things getting out of control and their inability to buy, you know, proper housing at decent costs, all this kind of thing, right? And they're just seeing what the old generation using this monetary system that's basically, you know, with a monetary system that's too inflationary, that's really subverting their future, right? Then now they see this new way of doing things. They see this new currency, cryptocurrency, that's a better way of doing things. So I don't see those, you know, the genie's out of the bottle 100%. Because when they get in power, I think it's going to be more adoption because it makes more sense.
Yeah.
Correct.
One thing I found interesting, too, as much as Bitcoin gets a lot of love, last week CNBC posted on Twitter a comment from Shark Tank host Mark Cuban, where he said as an investment, he thinks Ethereum has the biggest upside. Do you agree with that? And if so, why?
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying this for a while. I've been saying that probably 6 to 8 months ago, that if you're still investing in Bitcoin, you're investing behind the curve. Your money should be going into Ethereum. I mean, Ethereum is going to be the long-term winner. And
why is that? Why do you think that?
Because imagine if you could actually invest in the internet, not in the web companies, not in AOL, not in Google, but actually in the internet as an entity. Ethereum is the rails that the blockchain infrastructure is being built. I mean, when you look at DeFi, when you look at NFTs, when you look at anything in the crypto ecosystem, they're being built on top of the Ethereum blockchain. There's competitors now such as Solana, Tezos, Avalanche. There's competing blockchains coming into the space, but Ethereum is essentially the backbone that is that everything's being built on. So imagine being able to invest in that in its infancy. If Ethereum goes the way of let's say Google versus AOL, Ethereum is the sky's the limit. I mean, everything moving forward into the future is going to either be built on Ethereum or it's going to be layered into Ethereum. So, I mean, from an investment perspective, you want to invest in a store of value or you want to invest in a scalable technology that's
Right.
building the rails and the on-ramp for
Yeah.
users to adopt crypto. I'll take the latter.
You think we see $100,000 price tag with it one day?
$100,000 price tag. I mean, you got to figure that Ethereum at what, 4,200, you're looking at about a $500 billion market cap. So 25 times that.
A lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, you're looking at roughly a 10 trillion, $12 trillion market cap.
Yeah.
A $12 trillion market cap conservatively. So, I mean, but to put it into perspective, that's the market cap of gold. And we just said that gold is somewhat antiquated and on its way out.
Yeah.
And if you really want to go on the thesis that you're investing in what could be the internet, I mean, one could argue that the total addressable market far exceeds $12 trillion in market cap. Do I think it's going to get there? I hope so. I'll be shooting rockets into space with Elon Musk if Ethereum goes to 100K. But
Times
I mean,
are changing, that's for sure.
yeah, I think it's crazy. I mean, I'd love it to get there. Let's hit 10K first,
Yeah,
and
hear ya.
then start to postulate on 100K Ethereum.
All right, gents. Let's focus on U.S. cannabis. We all got on a helicopter and then we got on a plane and flew down to Las Vegas last week. Interesting place, to say the least. Lots of events going on. I think, but for the most part, people were just happy and not a lot of business talk. It was just people very excited to see each other face to face, some old faces that we haven't seen in about a year and a half to 2 years. But before we get into anything about specific about Safe Banking Act, what was your takeaway from the week, Ben?
Yeah, I think it was pretty much what you said. I think, conferences are kind of hit and miss, even though this was like the biggest conference. I don't think a lot of the tier 1 and tier 2 MSOs, at least the higher up reps, were there necessarily. So I think it was an opportunity for the smaller companies to really get some displays going and, more of the lifestyle products, the grow solutions, things like that. So it was great to learn from that perspective. Did I get any major takeaways in terms of knowledge or in terms of like insight about safe banking? Unfortunately, I did not. But it was still a great environment, and the market rallied off the first day. It kind of caught everybody by surprise. It was making new year-to-date lows, and then we got roughly a almost 10% rally off the bottom, right, from like the 28s to about 30, right? So a nice little start, but then
we were down there on that first day. There was some buzz in the air, and people were thinking, "Okay, here we go. We're going to hear something later that day," but never came to fruition.
No, I mean, if it was one takeaway from Vegas is that no one knows what's going to happen. No one's got any kind of certainty as to what's going to happen, and I mean, it's a guessing game. And I mean, to be honest, in the games that we play, uncertainty is the worst thing possible. So I mean, all I can hope, or I think we can hope in concert with each other, is that there's some sort of safe banking pass in the next 2 months. By year's end, I mean, I think it'll definitely break the trend, and it's a political win for both people on each side of the aisle, and it stealthily gives these cannabis companies upside, and it gives them freedom, and hopefully we can break this downtrend, because I'm sick of it. It's been grueling to watch day after day, and it's all just uncertainty.
Yeah. Well, one thing's for sure, if you get a chance to go out there, check out the roulette tables. I did really well. I don't know how you guys did.
We went on that one run. Thank God it was an hour wait for lunch. I mean, we all cleaned house. We all cleaned house on that game.
Yeah, Chris Webber came by, played a couple games too. Saw him. You definitely know when he's in the room. That's for sure.
Yeah, he's quite tall.
Yeah, that's for sure. So, for the most part, for people that weren't there, then takeaway from you is that really not, other than it being the Super Bowl of events. I almost felt like this is an event that I don't want to say it's run its course, but something's got to change in this industry right now, because
I mean, I also think that a lot of people were just kind of caught up in the moment of finally being out of their house post-COVID. I think a lot of people were just happy to be there, to be out in the public and back in social functions and work functions. And I mean, it was refreshing to be there, but I mean, full transparency, was probably my least productive MJBiz in the past 5 years, business wise. and knowledge-wise. I mean, I wasn't seeing anybody walking around pitch decks asking for money. The entrepreneurs that were early really weren't there. I mean, it was a lot of deal guys and a lot of execs that just really wanted to talk and catch up for the most part.
Yeah, that's bear market. That's what bear market does. Kind of saps a little bit of enthusiasm, but I noticed that there's still a lot of there wasn't a lot of panic, right? Even though we've been in a bear market, O's is down close to about 50% from its peak. No one's really panicking, saying, "Oh, what's going on?" Right? It's more of a sense of everybody knows where it's going. It needs to get that over that hump of regulatory action, right? So there's no panic. Yeah. It was fine. It was just enthusiasm was sapped a little bit, but everybody was still upbeat. It wasn't like people are wondering, like the sky's falling kind of thing.
Yeah, that goes back to what we say. I mean, that goes back to what we keep saying, that the fundamentals are dislocated from the share price. Everyone that we were with knows that. They know that these companies are still making money hand over fist. It's just a matter of when the tides turn.
Yeah. I think the guy with the most energy while we were down there, Michael Berger, technical 420. He's a legend. You want a good laugh? Hang out with Michael.
He is a legend.
Berger. Let's pause on U.S. cannabis and instead focus on the country of Luxembourg and Tilray. Tilray became the third company to sign a supply agreement with Luxembourg, joining Canopy and Aurora. Luxembourg's population is a little over 600,000. So there were some conversations last week that we ran into some people to talk about the emergence and development of Europe. So should we read much into this? Because Luxembourg could very well be the first European country to legalize cannabis. Do you think this is a domino effect soon afterwards for other countries, Ben?
Not necessarily. I don't necessarily think that. I think each individual country legislator is going to go at their own pace, especially for a smaller country like Luxembourg. It's not really considered a leader. They're more of like a sort of like the Hamlet of Europe, where it's very high GDP per capita, but they're obviously just a very small nation.
Hello to the people of Luxembourg.
But we love Luxembourg, but it's not Germany. It's not France, for being honest, right? So I think it's a good first step. It's going to be good optics. But do I think Germany says, Luxembourg is legalizing cannabis, we're going to, push this through in the next 6 months? Not necessarily, but it is a good, it is a good benchmark for getting the ball rolling, at least from an optics perspective, I think.
Yeah. All right. Last segment, psychedelics. We got a big conference coming up in 2 weeks in your backyard, Anthony, down in Miami. Last week, as we said earlier in the U.S. cannabis landscape, we already got down to MJBiz. There's a little bit of a rally. There was a little bit of excitement in the air at the beginning of the week with MJBiz. So coming up in 2 weeks, we have Wonderland, which is going to be arguably the biggest conference ever held in this industry. And the biggest players in the space will be there with all the top executives of each company. Do we see a little bit of rally heading into this, knowing there will be a conference taking place, and you factor in Compass and their upcoming endpoints that'll happen soon after that?
I don't think it's going to have any effect on the market, to be honest. I mean, unless one of these companies puts out some transformational news, I don't see it really moving the needle. I mean, it's nice to have all the thought leaders and all the brain trust of the sector in one place. So, I mean, for me, I'm excited. I'm sure it'll be insightful. I'm sure we're going to have some very interesting conversations and insights into the sector. But from a capital markets perspective, I don't think it moves the needle a single bit unless you see one of the big boys like Cybin, Compass, or Atai put out a press release that day. That's transformational, in line with what you're going to see at the conference.
But that's stuff that we could be hearing, though, right now, is that some of the biggest players could be, we don't know what it is, but there could be some big announcements that do happen during that conference. If so, you think there's, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, if that happens, I think that could move the needle for certain companies. But I mean, let's see what it is. I mean, I welcome it. I'd like some excitement in the space. I'd like something to talk about and really bring the wind back into our sails, because this has been a couple of months to forget in both sectors.
Yeah, we've talked about it before, about it being, and I sort of agree with Anthony, just because the sector is going to be a little bit more siloed, right? It's not going to trade like cannabis. We talked about this. It's going to be
realists.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And we're here, we're going to tell it like it is. We're not going to sugarcoat it, and that's why hopefully people are watching. But the sector is a lot more siloed. So it's not going to run like, Canadian cannabis where Aurora had news, Canopy had news, and then the whole sector takes off, right? And you have these, shit pubcos go from like 30 cents to $3 like we saw. It's going to be a lot more controlled.
Those are the best days. Those are the absolute best days ever.
Yeah. It would be nice to get back to those days. However, I'm going to caveat by saying, and I think the evidence also suggests that hasn't happened. Compass rallied over 20% last week after their IR manager came out and said that basically endpoints are back on track. So it ran, but we didn't really necessarily see the sector run. We didn't see a lot of selling. It edged up on the ETFs, but it didn't run. So there's no evidence of that yet. But I'm going to preface this by saying that, even though the sector hasn't run or hasn't really taken Compass's lead, if they have blowout earnings, if endpoints meet and sort of knock it out of the park, I'm going to go on record and say, we're going to see a pronounced rally in the sector. I don't know how long it'll last, but that will be very, very good affirmation for that, psilocybin is safe, it's effective, and that has frontline treatment potential. So I think the ones that will follow in its footsteps more will be like the Cybins of the world who are taking psilocybin, their own formulations for depressive disorders, right?
Yes.
And then as you go down the curve and... Sorry, go ahead.
Frontline.
Frontline.
You just nailed it. We need if they meet that, then
yes,
everything will rise.
We're going to see a run.
If they don't, we're in trouble.
Right, and I think even though Compass rallied this week, you're not seeing the sector follow because people still need to see that. I mean, think about it. You're not going to invest necessarily in this 70-cent, Canadian cannabis company just because Compass ran. But if Compass has blowout endpoint results, then that 70-cent company that's kind of doing the same thing, studying psilocybin, they have a phase 2 for depression, that same sort of ballpark area, all of a sudden it looks a lot more appetizing, right? When instead of buying Compass at 60, maybe you're buying this, you're going to see the sympathy plays sort of catch a bit, I think.
Yeah, I'll never forget. I'll never forget. I was at a conference when the press release came out that Constellation was investing $4 billion in Canopy. At the market open that day, boom. Everything. Just went nuts. We were dancing. We were like dancing in our hotel room. We were like, "This is real. Their money's there." Everything just went ballistic. The thing that I remember most too is that not only that, Anthony, but it was in the heart of a bear market. It was a brutal bear market for Canada that summer. It was like a lot like MSOs right now. We talked about this before, but I'm sort of reiterating. It was a brutal down every day, maybe for every 10 sessions, every 2 weeks, there's maybe 2 up sessions. Things would just melt down 3, 4, 5, 6% a week. And then boom, out of nowhere. And I got to give Bruce and company credit for keeping it secret because no one apparently knew about this because everything was at its lows and then it just 180.
Welcome to Investor Podcast 2021, where we begin talking about psychedelics and somehow it gets back to cannabis, right?
It always
comes back to cannabis.
It's
cannabis. I was sitting out in Australia having a fishing rod and I saw a weed plant. And speaking of weed,
it's like when I'm talking to these crypto guys, it's like, well, my first love, cannabis. It's always going to be, somehow the conversation will always get back there, especially when you're talking about investing in capital markets.
One thing that's grabbed my attention in the psychedelic industry, there's some great companies out of the UK that have some incredible Awaken. Small Pharma had some news last week. That stock was up over 70%. Market took notice based on the news. They announced they were granted an innovation passport designation for their lead product of DMT, which seems to be a growing trend amongst compounds. But when I look at Compass, I look at Awaken, as I said, I look at a few other companies within that space. The amount of research with Dr. Robin Cahard-Harris, Imperial College, Dr. David Nutt. I don't necessarily think North American investors have a true understanding yet of this industry, and what they should learn a lot is the valuable research I almost feel like the research in psychedelics is kind of like what the Canadian landscape was with cannabis in the early days. Do you not think, Ben?
I do. I see a lot of similarities with the caveat that I think it's going to be a little bit more siloed. But that being said, I do see the parallels because there's that enthusiasm. They both have, an extraordinary TAM, and frontline treatments are clearly needed. The COVID generation is creating all these depressive things. I read things every day about how this market's exploded, like depression disorders, anxiety disorders.
Yeah.
So when you actually think about it, psychedelics is like the fundamentals backing psychedelics are just off the charts right now. Now, obviously, it's going to take a little bit of time to see who the winners and losers are going to be. It's going to be at least 5 years before treatments come to light, assuming that they pass each step of the way.
That's crazy to think.
But it's like
that's
the
crazy to think
market,
5 years.
Like, yeah, the ones who win end up winning here. It's like playing a lottery ticket, where you spend $1,000, you could 50x your money, but it's going to be super tricky. So you got to follow the right people, and you got to follow things very closely.
Yeah, I mean, my fear is you get the good Compass news and they reach this frontline designation, and then pharma just comes in and goes boom, 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 and just starts going on a shopping spree. And then all these companies are then siloed into Big Pharma right away.
That's another conversation we should have. Will Big Pharma come in? I'm not sure if they'll come in just yet. I think
they will.
Some of the doctors I've interviewed recently have said yes. It's not a matter of if, but when, and it's going to happen a lot quicker than what you think.
Yeah, look at how much Prozac
and a lot of it has
sell.
to do. What's that? Sorry.
Look at how much Prozac they sell. It's billions and billions and billions of dollars, and it's only one SKU. I mean, they've got drug after drug after drug that these psychedelic compounds are gonna replace if they're efficacious. And I mean, if it's one thing these pharma companies are doing, it's just chasing the dollar. They're not gonna let that go.
Well, it's gotten to a crossroads, though. As much as they're chasing dollar, there's a epidemic even prior to COVID happening of like mental health everywhere, and it's still going to come down to the almighty dollar. But if there's money to be made, but then people obviously to in some cases be cured of certain ailments that they're obviously dealing with on a day-to-day basis, then that's just the world that we live in, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm all for. Yeah, I mean, I'm all for curing it instead of patching it like they've done for the past 50, 60 years.
Yeah. Okay, guys, let's get to our lightning round. It's early in the week, so we got a lot of stuff going on, but let's find out. Anthony, I don't know if you've got 2 picks. Ben, if you got 2 picks, but for everybody's watching, let's kick things off. Anthony, who you got for your first pick?
I'm going with Square. Square is going to be one of the best ways for mass crypto use. Jack Dorsey is a crypto advocate. They're doing all the right things in all the right places, and they're leading first with fintech. So I'd be looking at Square, SQ.
Ben, who you got?
It's really tough in the verticals that I cover. Perhaps a tie because they own about almost 20% of Compass stock.
Compass?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously they're going to be a beneficiary, and not to mention the beneficiary of if the endpoints reach fruition. So I think that's going to do well if it goes where we think it's going to go.
My first pick, I'm going to chime in. I like Cybin. I think the industry is poised to make a turn for the better next month. I really, really do. Even though we were at MJBiz, it's funny how a lot of the conversation was about psychedelics. So I'm going out on the limb. I think we're going to see some big announcements that'll happen in a couple of weeks. I could be wrong, but we'll see what happens. And that happens to be my first pick. You guys got any more picks for the week, Anthony?
Yeah, I'm going to go with DWAC. It's the SPAC that Donald Trump is putting his social media company into.
You went there, Anthony.
Yeah,
33 minutes in this podcast, we didn't bring that up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go there. It went from 18 to like 110 in 3 trading sessions. If he can harness the power of the right, and if he can monetize his base, I mean, you're talking about a massive platform and audience that is going to create a hell of a lot of money and a hell of a lot of data, and it's not going to go anywhere.
Anthony, of course that's going to happen. Of course that's like, can you imagine if you can invest in a company where you're supporting Donald Trump and you own a piece of that company as a shareholder?
Okay. So, but think about this, and I think we actually had a conversation about this in Vegas. So Donald Trump has a social media platform, but if Apple, Google, and everybody else platform his ass and don't make it, you can't get to it, or you can't engage with it. I mean, then it's useless.
So how would it work if he created his?
web-based.
How would it work
He'd have
that
to
if he
go-
created his own server?
He'd have to not server doesn't have to do anything with it. It'd have to just be web-based versus app-based. Because if you can't get into the App Store, if you can't get an iOS, I mean, you're dead in the water with an app. But I mean, I think if he can work his magic, I mean, sure. I mean, that's going to be I don't want to say a Facebook rival,
Good point.
but that's going to be a valuable platform for years to come.
Yeah. Crazy. This guy,
Yeah.
9 Live,
Yeah.
he's just getting started at 9 Live.
Oh, he's back. He's coming back in 2024. He's going to come back just to piss everybody off.
Yeah. So
Assuming
I'm
they're a
very
fair
afraid.
election. So maybe I shouldn't have said that, but
I'm
You know.
very afraid to see him come back, but I do think we're on a collision course for it, and this is the first step in him setting that up.
gents, in addition to me winning about 90% of my calls in roulette last week, just wanted to let you know that I parlayed 7 games last week and brought another $4,500 in football. But it's early. It's Tuesday. I don't know what the games are this upcoming week, but what a week it was. What a week.
You mentioned Michael Berger in the middle of the podcast. I think he's hit about $10,000 this week on player props.
Did he?
Yeah, he went like 15 for 15 on Sunday with pure player props.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was insane.
Okay,
Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, the real deal in Cincinnati.
Let me
They're
take this
carrying
moment
my
to
fantasy team.
let me take this moment to plug the newsletter as well, since we never do any plugging here. If you go to the contact page at thedailysreport.com, you can sign up to our newsletter. Obviously not as impressive as what you just said, fellas, but I'm 6-3 on the line since week 2. I put out the picks every week, and Survivor picks.
Nice.
I think we're 12-0. So if you want if you're into gambling or if you play the line, Survivor, sign up, and I'll get you 2 or 3 picks every week.
Okay. Subscribe to this channel too, and I'm going to give away $500 cash later this week. I feel rather giving after what happened last week in Vegas. So, guys, I appreciate it. We'll check in later this week and see how the market's performing, okay?
Appreciate it. Talk soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.